wonderful to have you join us this evening as we meet with artist and poet Robert Schultz. And he is sitting right now in his solarium. And that's where he meets every morning with his wife, Sally, for a cup of coffee. Extra special for me, Bob, because we've worked together over, 5, 6, 7 years on different projects. And so I'd love to tell everyone a little bit about Bob's background. See, he has authored 6 books in 3 genres and is an exhibiting artist. He has received a National Endowment for the Arts Award, Cornell University's Corson Bishop Poetry Prize, and from the Virginia Quarterly Review, the Emily Clark Bulk Prize for Poetry. He has spoken by invitation at the National Gallery of Art, Oxford University. I particularly remember when you called and said you'd be going to Oxford, and the Library of Congress. For over a decade, he has collaborated with the photographer Binh, and we'll be hearing from Binh a little bit later, and producing 2 art exhibitions and publishing 2 books. Most recently, War Memoranda, Photography, Walt Whitman, and Memorials. Bob's artwork is held by the Library of Congress, various museums, and private collectors in the US and abroad, and he lives in Salem, Virginia. Bob Schultz art treats the themes of war, memory, and memorials, often focusing on portraits of soldiers and their loved ones. These portraits made using the chlorophyll print process enact Walt Whitman's central trope. Death goes into the ground and life, renewed, rises out of it. Soldiers' faces, risen in the flesh of leaves, confront us with the human cost of war. His more recent work continues to explore nature and its seasons using scanography of plant specimens to make archival prints featuring deep Black backgrounds. And I know we'll be able to see process tonight, see Bob's studio, and also, be really involved in also the outside where some of that happens in his space in Salem. So Bob, I'm going to turn it over to you, and welcome to Curated Cribs. It's wonderful to have you joining us this evening.
Well, thanks, Cindy. This is a lot of fun for us. And what you suggested is that we sort of run through a typical day, and it starts in my wife's solarium. This is not my solarium. This is Sally's with her lovely orchids going here, and it looks out upon her spice garden. And she also does jewelry and glass bead making. So some of her work is here. And this is where we start the day. I used to have my blue chair for students to recline in my office when I taught, but I retired 3 years ago. So now this is my morning coffee chair. And Sally sits at her desk and does her to-do list for her gardening chiefly. And that's the way every day begins, more or less, now these days.
Oh, what a wonderful beginning to each day with the 2 of you in that space. And it looks like a perfect space for not only that, enjoyment of each other's conversation, to-do lists, and the starting of your day with writing and artwork that complement each other. But, has this been your home the entire time, or is this kind of a new adventure?
Well, a realtor that knows what we do and had seen our house and our small workspaces there called us 3 years ago, roughly, and said, I know you're not looking, but I think there's a house you need to see because of the studio space that it could provide. And 48 hours later, we had bought this house and moved the spring of my retirement. And so it has been a really good place for art and writing and gardening, which are basically the 3 things I do now.
Wonderful. Well, if it happened in 48 hours, it must be the perfect fit, which I know as we walk through the spaces, we'll and see that as well.
Well, typically after coffee, I do some desk time, some writing or organizational time. So going through the door of the solarium into the main downstairs space, we get to where I have my writing spaces. So there's my desk, some side storage, and I get to sit under these windows and look out at gardens and woods. Our acre abuts a wild woods, and there are big trees out there, and it makes a wonderful green screen for me when I'm in this space.
Well, and has this always been part of your routine, or has this, changed, of course, as you've retired from Roanoke College?
Well, I've always tried to do a little desk work first thing in the morning before my day starts, and I've always liked to have an afternoon teaching schedule. But of course, I have a lot more flexibility now that I'm not teaching, and there's time for other things. But the morning routine of giving some of my first hours to the desk is something I've stuck with. And sometimes, it's not good to sit so much. So there's a stand-up writing desk facing a wonderful painting by Michel Gagliano.
Beautiful.
And Sally's a calligrapher. And at one point, she made this this set of calligraphic smartass remarks about poets. Such as, they're all attributed. All poets are mad, said Robert Burton in 1621. The man is either crazy or a poet, said Horace in 25 BC. Mark Twain said, moon talk by a poet who hasn't been to the moon is likely to be dull. And it just goes on and on like that. So another one is by Heinrich Heine in 1827. I dreamed that I was God himself, great Lord of universes, with angels crowding round my throne, all whooping up my verses. There's a little bit of a revenge dimension here to the wife of a poet, I think, going on, but all in good fun.
And does Sally continue to do calligraphy? It's beautiful work.
Yeah, she's quite a calligrapher, and you'll probably see some pieces as we move through the house. There was one that I want to show you here in the solarium again, which is a quotation by Marshall McLuhan about the pleasures of the edged pen and sensory experience of writing. So, I write for content, and she writes for the very form of the writing as art. So, they don't overlap a lot, except when she does one of my poems in calligraphy. So after the writing hours, we've usually done some gardening together. Although when we get into the heat of summer, the gardening will have to come first in the coolest early morning hours, and then I'll come in and get cleaned up and come in here again. Would you like to see the garden space?
We would love to.
I'll walk you out the solarium door and across the front of the house. This is a little patio outside the solarium, and we have to name all the beds, and this is the Sally bed because it's just outside her solarium room.
And we can hear the birds too.
The birds are great. She feeds the birds. We've got a lot of bird activity. There's a hill that goes down to a creek next to Beach Road. And I'm probably getting some glare here, but can you see the garden across the driveway? This is the lot adjacent to the house. Our house is on one lot, and the big garden space is on the adjacent lot. And then behind it is woods. And the deer come out and want to eat the garden, and so it's kind of a battle.
It's always
They're
a back and
beautiful,
forth.
but yeah, they're beautiful, but they get into things.
It looks like a very peaceful, tranquil place that you can continue with your artwork as well as your writing.
Well, it has gotten involved in the artwork because inevitably when I'm out there working, I see something, a little local beauty, a blossom, or maybe even just a clutch of fallen magnolia leaves on the driveway that are interesting. And I carry them in and put them on the scanner and see what they look like. We'll get to that a little later, but here's the garden.
Beautiful.
Right now we have our grandson Axel, who's 2.5, here with us with his parents, daughter Lucy and husband Jeremy. So you'll see a little bit of them in these pictures. I think this was a grand garden at one point that fell into disuse, and in the 3 years that we've been here, we've done a lot of work to bring it back. So there are some wonderful inherited, mature flowering trees and shrubs, but also areas that just needed to be completely reconstructed. So it has been one of the big things that Sally and I do together, especially now in my retirement. I did all the stonework and made some turf steps. And I find out that the part of gardening I like is landscape architecture and making stone walls and so forth. And then, zooming in on a specimen like this, these things get seen and plucked and brought into to scan.
Well, and do you select then and plant particular floral and shrubs and trees in terms of thinking ahead and the use of in your artwork? And I know you said your grounds are about an acre.
Yeah. Well, I haven't. Sally is fully in charge of the garden, and she selects the plants, and she's sort of a collector. So she likes to have interesting specimens. And so I have the luxury of just, browsing what she has made and seeing things that might be interesting to work with and bringing them in. The only thing that I plant and make sure that I have on hand are plenty of hostas and nasturtiums. And I've got a couple of packages of nasturtium seeds that I need to get into the ground because hostas and nasturtiums are terrific leaves for chlorophyll print making.
Wonderful. And that was a great overview of the space that you use outside, because your garden and, as you say, you're collecting things to bring to use in your artwork. And now we're in your larger studio space where most of your work happens.
Yes. This is the big room that the realtor said made her think of us. And so there's a lot of art storage in here. This is where the chlorophyll printing and a lot of the work with materials happens. I pulled out a few pieces that you might like to see. This is from the Being Seen series. It started as a chlorophyll print of a young Union soldier in a nasturtium leaf. And working with this material on my computer screen, making the transparencies that I use in the chlorophyll print process, I had these faces blown up on my screen to to take out certain defects, to work, with the highlights in the eyes and so forth. And so these faces were confronting me on my monitor. And I thought, this is really strong. They're asking me stuff. And so how do I make other people see this? So I scanned these and then blew them up and printed them large, cropped tight. And this is a whole series. It's called Being Seen. And this one is an unidentified African-American woman circa 1860. This is a very tight crop of the face of a young girl. In the larger image, she is wearing a morning dress and holding a photograph of a father or a brother. So that's a series that came out of the chlorophyll print process. And these images are from the Library of Congress and in the U.S. Library of Congress, the Lillienquist family collection of Civil War portraits.
Which I know many have seen the exhibition, which was at the museum, but also traveled into a number of other institutions, which was in our galleries in about 2015.
That's right. The War Memoranda exhibition, the one that Binh and I did together, and this is where this work is stored, and
yeah, and we're showing on the screen now that the War Memoranda, the photography, Walt Whitman, and renewal, and in the galleries. So those in those first galleries, just a beautiful, powerful exhibition. And there were, ways where you could sign and give your response to the exhibition as well.
Well, the museum gave me one of the guest books, and some of the comments in there are priceless. I mean, the people who've been touched by war, or had family members touched by war, had things to say about the effects of the exhibition on them. All of my chlorophyll prints were of Civil War era soldiers, Northern and Southern, black and white. But Binh had concentrated on American soldiers who were casualties of the Vietnam War. So it was all about witnessing to the reality of war, the real cost of war at the individual level. And, Maya Lin's powerful war memorial in Washington, D.C. Accounts for war name by name, and War Memoranda accounts for war face by face. Walt Whitman is a big inspiration. I mean, if you're thinking about leaves and rebirth, and his whole trope is, as was mentioned earlier, death goes into the ground and life renewed rises from it. He was not about linear time, but about circular time. And these are two special leaf prints that I've been able to make. This is the early 1859 image of Walt Whitman, sometimes called the Christ likeness. And this is from the 1870s as an old man. And this one's called the Old Philosopher portrait. Both of these hosta leaves I was able to pluck from Walt Whitman's own garden, back garden in the Camden House, where he spent his last years. At the end of Song of Myself, Whitman writes, I bequeath myself to the dirt to grow from the grass I love. If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles. So I took that literally and plucked these leaves from his garden and made these leaf prints in the back window of my car, driving home from New Jersey to Virginia, exposing them in the sun in the back window. I saw an exhibition at the predecessor of the Taubman Museum, the Art Museum of Western Virginia, before it became the Taubman and moved into its new buildings. And there was an exhibition of work by Binh that had these wonderful Cambodian and Vietnam War subjects in huge tropical leaves. And it just, coming at it as someone who admired and studied Whitman, it just knocked my socks off. And I went back in there and sat down and wrote poems and things like that, and got Binh's contact information, and um, called him, emailed him. We struck up a correspondence, and eventually he had a residency at Hollins. And then later I brought him to Roanoke College, and we drove around Virginia and Pennsylvania and visited war sites, battlefield sites, and he started doing photography, and the collaboration developed. And he said, Bob, I'm not doing chlorophyll prints anymore. I'm doing other photographic processes. And he taught me the process and said, okay, well, you do the Civil War stuff, and I've got the Vietnamese stuff. And that's the way War Memoranda happened. And that's how I got started in visual arts.
Well, and that's a great segue into your collaboration, like you said, with Binh. That must be over 15 years in terms of when you first saw that exhibition, met with Binh. He's come to Roanoke, and then this has evolved over time.
Yes, that's right. And we've visited him in the Bay Area. He's a San Francisco Bay Area guy. We've traveled out there, visited him. He's visited here, stayed with us. I mean, not only has it become a really interesting collaboration, but he's become a deep family friend. Sally loves him. This goes on and on.
Well, and I think his newer work and his recent series is Daguerreotypes celebrating United States National Park System. Is that correct? With the anniversary year and a lot of things that he's continuing. And he's in San Jose at the university there.
That's right. And he has been doing Yosemite and other national parks, but Yosemite, he's revisiting some of the famous Watkins and Adams sites and perspectives, but doing it not in camera and printed photographs, but in daguerreotypes, which brings a whole new dimension. And the meaning of that for him is that he's an Asian American, and when he goes to the parks, he feels like he's affirmed as an American. And so if you've ever looked at a daguerreotype, it has a polished mirror-like surface. And when you look at Yosemite in one of his dags, you see your own reflection superimposed over the park. And it makes a statement about citizenship and accepting whoever is there.
Which is a place that we can pause, and we have a pre-recorded video with Binh. So we've heard a lot about that collaboration, the friendship, and his continued new work in the national parks. And it so happens that the Taubman has an exhibition of Ansel Adams right now. So many have seen that. It is open until August 1st, and is a statewide partnership from the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. So also another connection in that art lens. So we're going to go ahead and meet Binh.
Hello, my name is Binh, and I'd like to welcome you to my studio. Well, right now we're in a room in my house in Gilroy, which I call the viewing room, because this is where I place out daguerreotypes in the right lighting condition to see them. These days I've been making a lot of daguerreotypes, of landscape daguerreotypes, mostly of national parks, as well as landscape around the Bay Area. This one here is of Yosemite Fall in Idaho. It's an amazing place. It was first photographed, I believe, by Timothy O'Sullivan, who went out into the West as part of the expansion of the West in the later part of the 19th century. Timothy O'Sullivan made many photographs of Yosemite Fall. This here is Yellowstone Fall. I love photographing the national parks. As you can see, as I move my camera around, the daguerreotype process is highly reflective. You can see the tripod there. and at the right angle, you can also see yourself in the photographic image. This is here, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. I forgot what year this was made, but it was made before the expansion. This is Joshua Tree. It's again one of the many amazing landmarks we have here in the United States, part of the National Park System. I also collect a lot of daguerreotypes, 19th century daguerreotypes, just so I could compare my craftsmanship to the stuff that was made in the 19th century. Coming up is Yosemite Fall. Here, this is actually Lower Yosemite Fall. This photograph was probably made, I think, in 2014. I've been photographing Yosemite since 2012. Or actually 2009 is when I first went out to Yosemite with the daguerreotype process. And I, again, just love the detail of the daguerreotype process here. For example, here in this photograph, you can actually see a film crew probably making a documentary on the national parks. Yeah. Just, let's see, moving forward here, this is Death Valley National Park. It's known as Death Valley because in the summer of the 19th century, a couple folks got lost, and when they were saved, as they head out of the valley, they'd turn around and say, "This is Death Valley." This is Grand Canyon National Park. Again, it's very hard to really show you the quality of the daguerreotype. You kind of have to really to see it in person. I was talking to a friend who was just telling me that the daguerreotype is so exhausting to look at because you have to keep moving around. It's hard to see the image only at the right angle. And I thought, well, yeah, that is quite interesting. It is quite a physical photograph. This is Nevada City, where it used to be a gold town out there in the foothill of the Sierra Mountain in California. And now its race is mainly used to grow pot, marijuana. This is Seal Rock in San Francisco, a composition that's made famous by the California photographer Carleton Walken in the 19th century. Well, basically not California, but West Coast photographer, I gotta say. A lot of my work, I do harken back to early photography, other photographers who stand at the same place as I've stood today. This is Lafayette Hillside Memorial, where the community placed crosses on the hillside to represent the dead civilians. The dead soldiers in the Middle East. Started in 2006. This memorial is still up today. So you can imagine, 2006 to now, this become a fixture in the landscape. For 15 years, I was imagining a child growing up just walking across this on the way home from school and reminded that we're still in the Middle East. This is Petroglyphs in Utah at Newspaper Rock. And lastly, I want to just show you another view of more of the production studio in the back of my house here, where I have all the tools I need to make daguerreotype, and as well as any other sort of photographic art. That is a laser cutter, which I use to cut my my acrylic mats. That's a film hood where I do a lot of more of the mixing of chemistry, stuff that is kind of, again, toxic. I shouldn't breathe. I place it in a film hood. And that over here is actually is where I polish copper. So to make daguerreotypes, I would need to polish a lot of copper plates. And then after polishing the plate mirror finish, I will plate them with silver. So then I have a sheet of silver coated copper. And then using other chemicals, I'm able to secure an image in the camera. So you have silver, and then you place the silver over a box called a fuming box and expose that to iodine vapor. And the iodine and silver will come in contact, and that produce silver iodine. And there you go. That is what is needed to make a daguerreotype. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks to Binh for joining us virtually. And the behind the scenes is always fascinating to see process and to see what is an artist, how do they create that final product. And so, Bob, I know that we're in your studio space too, and would love to learn more about your scanning, about your custom work. And that demonstration of setting up the leaf prints. We've seen the garden, we've seen the final product in terms of the artwork. So tell us a little bit more about your creative process.
Well, here's a work I'm in the process of constructing, and this one has a chlorophyll print in the middle of it, several Union soldiers. But this leaf is from a catalpa leaf in Falmouth, Virginia, from a tree beneath which Walt Whitman in 1862 saw a pile of amputated limbs thrown from the manor house that had been appropriated as a hospital. And so these trees, called witness trees, have become quite special to me because they drank the blood of soldiers and are living now. So the leaf is from the tree. So are the seed pods and these dried leaves. And I've never done something with this kind of dimension. You can see I'm going to have to build a box to encase it that goes up about 4 inches to cover the leaves. But I call this a reliquary, sort of after the medieval idea of the saint's bones in a reliquary box. So I'm imagining new uses for the chlorophyll prints, but I think you'd probably like to know the basics of how you make a chlorophyll print. And I believe we've prepared in advance a video to go through that process. I'd like to demonstrate now how to make a chlorophyll print. I've got a fresh leaf out of the garden, and the rest of the equipment is very simple. I've got one sheet of glass with some absorbent fabric on it, some felt, and a second sheet of glass that I'll put on top, and a vinyl transparency with the image in it. Now, the transparency material is just the regular school transparency. You can still get them at the office supply stores. And you obtain your image digitally, or scan it, or download it, or however you obtain your digital images, and then work with it to modify it if you need to. I use Photoshop and some other programs. This time I've added a deep black background just to frame her face, and you get some high halftones that'll work on the leaves too. So the first step is to get your transparency. Then go out in the garden, get your leaf. That goes down first on the fabric, and then position position the image on your leaf. And I've got a little bit of white showing there because I'm using a variegated hosta that has white along the edges. So that's a touch here. Now you just put the other sheet of glass on top, fasten them together. Manuscript clips are what I use. They're simple and handy, and you can get the really big ones if you need to. The little ones don't work. These are sort of medium clips. And then this goes out in the sun. Bright, hot Virginia sun is good. And the time of exposure in the sun will vary according to the kind of leaf, the kind of weather you've got that particular day. Hosta leaves are really good leaves to use. They really take an image. Typically on the hot day, it would take a full afternoon, maybe part of another day. Some leaves go really fast. A nasturtium leaf, which is beautiful, could go in 2 or 3 hours. They're very delicate. Not all leaves work. You have to experiment. Finally, when you decide it's time to bring it in, and there's some guesswork involved in that because you can't see under the transparency. You can only see the exposed parts. So you don't want to overexpose, and sometimes you'll underexpose. So it's a little bit of a trial and error thing. Fortunately, all the materials are cheap, especially if you have a garden with lots of leaves in it. So afterwards, when the image is in the leaf, you need to press it flat and dry. Put some paper on each side and newsprint on each side, and put it under a stack of big heavy books or in a press of some kind. And it'll take weeks, maybe a month and a half. They really need to be dried, bone dry. And then the next step is to apply it to some surface, or decide how you want to display it, or keep it in a drawer for viewing once in a while. I'll demonstrate one of the ways that I prepare my finished leaf prints for framing and exhibition.
Well, that explains too, because, when you showed those first prints of Walt Whitman and the soldier, you said that you did it in the back of your vehicle. So that explains too, you can use that as a moving studio.
Well, not only that, but when you're pushing the season and it gets to fall and the temperatures start to drop off, you can develop things in the car with the windows rolled up and get the temperature up to support the process.
Well, and I know it's definitely, it comes with a lot of experience in terms of that creation. So you're making it sound very easy, as you said, that we can all try it. But I know for a fact, because I've tried it, it's more difficult than that. So tell us what you've got there in front of you in this space that you're doing, and what other processes are you using?
Yes, well, this is a room adjacent to the big studio room we were in earlier. This is where I do the scanning process, which I've set up here. This is my scanner. It's, a lot of you probably have a scanner on top of your all-in-one printer copier, and you could try this sort of thing. But what I've been doing is taking the lid off and finding things of interest from the garden, and then scanning them with the lights out and the top off, so that you get a deep black background. Now, I can demonstrate this. The difficulty, of course, is that the picture is taken from below, and the camera is the scanner, and part of the uniqueness of the product happens because the scanner is not built for this, and it has such a shallow depth of field. And when you do it in a dark room with the lights turned out, you get an interesting deep black background. So I'm just going to run this as a process demonstration. And so I've got a couple of peonies here, and that's the preliminary low resolution scan, so I can see what I've got. And that's what that looks like. And then if I'm happy with that, I can go ahead and hit the scan button for the high resolution scan. And then the only thing I do afterwards is maybe adjust a little bit contrast, deepen the blacks. There's always dust particles to take care of in Photoshop and so forth. But again, if you have an all-in-one printer, copier, scanner, I urge you to just take the lid off, darken the room, put something on it, and see what happens.
Stunning. So, I don't think that's what everybody expected as it came up on, seeing the leaves and the flowers, and then going and moving to your, what came out of the scanner. And what do you have here?
Well, this is a piece that was made by this technique, and it is a magnolia seed pod. And this is going to be in the Taubman's future show, homecoming show. What's the title of it exactly?
Yeah, Homeward Bound. We're going to be doing our second triennial. So congratulations for being juried in. That's exciting. So we'll all be able to see it. It'll open December 17th. And we'll be able to see this will be included. Great.
Yeah. And, I get to hang some stuff. These are some photographs that I made of the last total solar eclipse, studying the eclipse discs on the ground underneath the trees as they worked like pinhole cameras. It was kind of funny. We drove down to the place of total eclipse, and at that moment, the climactic moment, and everyone is looking up through their special glasses, I'm running around with my camera pointed at the ground. This is another one of those specimen scans. These are wisteria seed pods and seeds. And this is a leaf print in the process of being cast. Now, the leaf is always so fragile after it's been dried. This one isn't cast in yet, and it's very vulnerable, very thin and brittle. And so it's treated like a kind of biological specimen that you cast in resin. We have a pour that we can demonstrate, and this was the subject of the pour. And I think it came out pretty well, which after you've seen this video of the process, you may be surprised, because I found out that it was hard to talk and do this at the same time. But this is, again, that woman, African-American woman, unidentified, circa 1860, from an image in the Library of Congress collection. And this is a Bodai fig leaf. So you can see where we are here, and I'm showing you an image of Walt Whitman in a hosta leaf, and what to do with it to make it frameable, to protect it. The resin does have a little bit of a UV protectant quality, but also once the leaves are completely dried and flattened, I do spray them with UV protectant spray. Now, they'll be cast against a plexiglass sheet. And what I'm showing you there is that I've made a little tray out of it by fastening frame spacers around the edge, so that will hold the resin without it running off the edge of the plexi. And this is the leaf print I just showed you, but it is only covered at this point by a very thin top layer of resin. Basically, there are 3 pores. Resin goes on behind the leaf, and then when it's partially dried and tacky, then the leaf is dropped and positioned. And then it has to rest for about 24 hours before it's ready for another pour. And there's another thin pour that goes on top of the leaf. And then what I'm going to demonstrate here pretty soon is the final pour that kind of fills up the tray. And we're going to have some live action here. The excitement comes when you have to use the propane torch to get the bubbles out of the resin. If you've used this product, you know that once you pour it, little bubbles start to form, and you need to get the bubbles out so it's clear. I'm pointing out the 2 products that get mixed in the resin. The one is the resin proper, and the other one is the hardener. So you have to mix those quite precisely in a 50-50 proportion, and then also make sure that you mix it very completely. You don't want just parts of it that are mostly hardener, mostly resin. So now the pour is happening. You just take this mixture and pour it onto the leaf and the plexi in its tray. And then I'm going to pick this up and rotate it around so that it flows into all the corners. So it's completely covered and more or less even. And I think, you know, what's happening now is that I'm narrating and tipping this thing and trying to fill the tray. And then eventually what happened is I was talking and I'm starting to spill resin out. And but I was able to clean it up, and see there I'm stripping off the excess from the frame spacers that I've spilled over the edge. And of course I've had to change the paper on my table since then because it got all glommed up with the resin. But it worked out, and the torch work did successfully remove the bubbles. And I think this one's good to go. It's what I showed you earlier before we started the tape. Looks like the finished product, and I can take this to the framer.
I love seeing the process work and being able to see that part of you know, what are the step-by steps. It's hard to imagine when you see the final of what happens.
Yes. Well, I'm struggling to put on my mask here, the filter mask, because especially when you run the torch over the resin and heat it up, it does send off fumes that are not good to breathe. We'll get a little fire here, and then we can break this off whenever required. It is fun, you know, it's all dimpled with these little bubbles, and then when you sweep the flame over it, they just rise up and remove themselves from the resin, and the resin goes quite clear, and it's a dramatic effect. I first did it under the tutelage of Binh on one of his visits here, and I overdid the torch and I scorched the leaf underneath, so that was a learning experience. You do this probably 3 times at 20-minute intervals, because you need to let it cool again before the next torching, and new bubbles will rise. But after 3 torchings at 20-minute intervals, it's ready probably to be covered carefully so that dust doesn't fall into the wet resin. And then 12 hours later, 24 hours later, it's going to be finished.
Thank you for showing the different processes of casting, of scanning, of the custom work and the leaf prints. I know that you have a number of book projects, and one I'm reading a lot of times as part of my mindfulness in the morning. Your new book, but we'd love to share with everyone some of the projects that you're currently and past books.
Sure. Well, I think what you're referring to now is my new collection of poetry, Into the New World,
Exactly.
which is very important to me because it was decades in the making. And finally, it's collected. Slant Books, a wonderful press in Seattle, did a beautiful job with it. And it's available through the usual places. In the past year, I've been making notes during our plague year, and at the same time gardening and bringing in specimens from the garden and scanning them according to the process you've just seen. And this has resulted in a book of dated entries, and then accompanying each dated entry is a scan from that day, whatever I've pulled in from the garden. So this runs from February to February during our pandemic year. And I hope we're coming out of it now, as we seem to be.
And we're pulling up on the screen some of the images from that most recent specimens of the plague year.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a zinnia with, I think that's Aquila, and then little sparkler white flowers. I don't know the names of everything. Sally would need to inform me, but that provided the cover image for this book. And, it's iris time, probably where a lot of you are and where we are. These are from the current spring year. And peonies, I love the peonies. And then that's a robin's egg that it's cracked in the back, and a baby robin emerged, and Sally brought it in and said, maybe you can use this. And I thought the blue went nicely with the pink and red peonies. And just peony petals too, picked up from the ground and put on the scanner. We have tulip poplars, and they're dropping their flowers, and pick stuff up on the ground and bring it in and put it on the scanner and see what happens.